there. Can we talk about aardvarks? For people between the ages of 18 and 30 who spend a lot of time on the internet, the strongest association they have with aardvarks would be the internet meme darling Arthur. I actually got a little curious about the history of Arthur memes in general, and it turns out they were getting made as early as 2011. Arthur memes are hysterical to young adults who grew up with the show, but Arthur didn't air on TV until 1998, and I was already like a fat, nerdy teenager by then, and sadly no one ever wanted to make memes from Muppet Babies or US Acres. My own personal cartoon aardvark from my nostalgia actually comes from the much-forgotten 80s Canadian TV show The Raccoons, the story of a bunch of fail-son roommates who fight the corrupt capitalists of the forest, Cyril Sneer, who is incidentally an aardvark. The show is alright. I think it could do really good as a reboot where like the Raccoons are like a bunch of socialist millennials who live in Brooklyn and they start up a podcast. It's also noted for being the only cartoon ever where the female character is identified as female by wearing a sports bra. It also has the most amazing credit theme song in all of 80s Canadian cartoon history. You can run with us. We've got everything you need. Run with us. We are free. I see the passion in your eyes. But despite growing up understanding that Arthur and Cyril Sneer were aardvarks, I don't think we actually know that much about the animal that inspired these guys. So aside from a meme for the perfect feeling when you high as fuck, what are aardvarks? Found all over sub-Saharan Africa, the aardvark is the only member of the Ariptopodidae family, and more unusually, the only member of the order Tibullidentata. Despite its piggish appearance and anteater-like habits, the aardvark is not related to either. Any members of its family went extinct a long time ago, and its more distant relatives are the tenric and elephant shrews, which make this even more confusing because that is not an actual shrew, and it might actually be more related to an elephant. The reason people tend to make these mistakes as to what aardvarks are related to is because of something called convergent evolution, a situation where two completely unrelated animals evolved to have similar traits because both species found it beneficial. The simplest way to explain this would be how bats and butterflies both have wings, but neither are related. It was just beneficial to both species to be able to fly. Not having any relatives still alive qualifies the aardvark as something scientists call a living fossil, meaning that this animal is the last of its species, and the animals it shares the closest resemblance to have been extinct for a very, very long time. And while Arthur might eat cake, or ass, actual aardvarks are insectivores, feeding on ants and termites. The aardvark is another good example of form follows function because despite its unique appearance, all of these things help this animal out. As this animal is nocturnal and active at night, it has poor eyesight. But as you can guess from its large ears and nose, it has impressive hearing and, of course, an amazing sense of smell. Smell is detected by a part of the brain called the olfactory bulb. With animals that have a poor sense of smell like humans, the bulb is small, and the bulb is large with animals that have a good sense of smell. So to give you an example of how an aardvark's sense of smell is, while multiple olfactory bulbs aren't uncommon, the aardvark has 9 of them, more than any other mammal. They have large claws that allow them to dig in the dirt for food, a thick hide to prevent them from being bitten and stung by ants, and they also possess a nictitating membrane. Nictitating membranes are a third eyelid, usually a clear one that can be blinked sideways. Usually, animals that possess them tend to be aquatic, such as frogs, sea lions, and crocodiles, and use them like built-in swimming goggles. So why does this grassland-dwelling animal have them? Safety goggles. Aardvarks can eat up to 50,000 insects in one night, meaning that they go after colonies. Having a nictitating membrane prevents ants from attacking and stinging the aardvark's eyes. As you can imagine from an animal that is nocturnal and spends most of its time in burrows, there is still not a lot we know about aardvarks, and outside of memes, this is another animal that isn't really going to pop up in your clickbait articles. Or will it? On December 21st, 2017, the Cincinatti Zoo announced that Winsel, the baby aardvark, had been born. He made his debut to the public this March, and hopefully, like the zoo did with the baby hippo Fiona, Winsel might be able to act as an animal ambassador of his kind, getting people excited and knowledgeable about these amazing animals outside of The feeling when they get you excited. Thank you so much for your patience on this one. And now a big thanks from everyone who's bought me a Ko-fi. So now I get to personally thank everybody who has contributed to my Ko-fis for the past month, and I get to read your questions out loud. Def Grappler writes, can you talk about animals like otters that get around this interesting phenomenon? And then he links to a really interesting article in The Atlantic about essentially animals that return to the ocean, like pinnipeds and cetaceans, tend to end up being a lot bigger than their other counterparts who stayed on land. And first off, Def Grappler, thank you so much for the Ko-fi. I definitely do plan to talk about animals in the Mustelidae family. So that would include sea otters, and it's a really, really awesome article. Mustelidae are definitely on the list of animals I want to do and talk about, and I'll definitely consider sea otters more specifically now because this is a really, really cool phenomenon. Orlando writes, can you do skinks? I saw one eating a hookworm and they seem really cool and dumb as shit. Orlando, thank you, so definitely appreciated. I actually would really like to do skinks. One of my favorite reptiles is the prehensile-tailed skink. They are being considered. The big thing on my videos though is I try to get them to be like a decent length, about like 5 to 6 minutes long, longer if I can. And I want to make sure that whatever animal I choose, I have a lot of interesting things to say and show and share about it. Long story short, yeah, skinks are definitely on the list. I just gotta make sure I have enough content to pad a whole video, so stay tuned. And thank you so much for the Ko-fis. The rest of you guys, if you want me to read your questions out loud, you can donate to my Ko-fi page. The link is below. So go ahead, buy me a Ko-fi. It's always appreciated. I'll give you a shout out if you leave me a question or a comment. I will read it on air. So cool, yay. That's all for today. Thanks for letting me talk about aardvarks.